James woke inside a pocket of snow so quiet it took him a moment to understand the entrance was gone. Hours earlier, he had been lying on a narrow shelf he had carved into the side of a drift near Blue Lake, in Australia's snowy mountains, tired from the ski-in and confident enough to sleep without setting an alarm. Now the opening that had faced the valley was sealed by a solid white wall. He pushed one hand toward the gap where the outside should have been and felt only packed snow. He grabbed the handle of his shovel and shoved it forward, expecting it to break into open air. It stopped dead. The trip had started as a backcountry ski adventure beyond Mount Kosciuszko. James and his friends had trained in outdoor recreation courses in the Blue Mountains. They carried food, maps, a GPS, phones, a satellite phone, and a personal locator beacon. The plan was to spend several days moving through the main range, from Dead Horse Gap into open country above the tree line. As they climbed away from the road, the wind rose hard enough to knock them around on the ridge. They still pushed on because the forecast did not look disastrous, and because the group had enough experience to believe they could manage what came. They reached Mount Kosciuszko, then moved toward Blue Lake. By late afternoon, the group needed camp. James liked snow caves. He trusted them more than fabric in bad weather, and on earlier trips he had learned how warm and quiet snow could feel once a person was inside one. His friends chose flatter ground for their tent. James looked for a lee slope where wind had deposited deeper snow. What he built was small and simple, more like a shelf cut sideways into the snow than a deep cave. He carved a sleeping area about the size of a one-person tent. The entrance was open enough that he expected to look out toward Charlotte Pass in the morning. The sky had been clear. There was no reason in his mind to wake every hour to clear the doorway. As night settled over the main range, the wind returned. In the tent, Dylan and another friend woke to fabric snapping in the gusts, but snow was not piling on them. Their tent sat exposed enough that the wind kept scouring it clean. James, tucked into the slope, was in a different world. The same wind was carrying snow over the ridge and dumping it into the lee side where he had made his shelter. Inside, he slept well. He woke a few times, rolled over, and thought he could still see the night outside. Then something about the view looked wrong. He pulled down the bag and stared at the entrance. The doorway had vanished. There was a small gap near the top, and he pushed into it with his hand, certain he would punch through. He did not. He tried the shovel handle next. It still did not reach daylight. The space that should have been only a few feet deep had become something else entirely. James assembled the shovel and started cutting blocks out of the doorway. He was still partly inside his sleeping bag, working awkwardly in the confined space, dragging snow back and throwing it behind him. After about 3 feet of digging, he was still buried. He put on more clothes and kept going. The pile of snow inside the shelter grew over his mattress, his sleeping bag, his pack, his food, and his cooking gear. Every block he removed gave him a little more tunnel and took away more of the space he needed to breathe and move. Then his body gave him the warning that changed everything. He was short of breath far too quickly. James was fit then, but the effort of digging in that small pocket was making him gasp. The air inside was not refreshing itself. The more he worked, the more oxygen he used. If the level dropped too low, he would not get a clean warning or a final chance to think. He would fade, pass out, and remain under the snow. Fear came in stages. First came disbelief, then anger. He thought about Dylan in the tent and imagined his friend clearing snow again and again without checking on him. From James's sealed pocket, it seemed impossible that this much snow could bury him while the others were fine. He did not know their tent was being stripped clean by wind while his shelter was being loaded over. He only knew he was trapped, and the air was getting worse. At one point he stopped and wrote in a journal. He later said he had not reread that page and kept it taped shut so he would not open it by accident. He wanted to leave something behind, maybe to say goodbye. Then he went back to the shovel. He narrowed the tunnel to about the width of a shovel blade high and 2 blades wide, small enough to save effort but large enough to crawl through if it reached open air. He dug another body length. Still nothing. By then he feared he was no longer following the old entrance at all. He might be tunneling deeper into the snowbank instead of out of it. He needed another way to find the surface. Somewhere above or near the buried doorway were his ski poles, left as markers. He searched through the snow inside the ruined entrance until he found one. Then he used the pole like a drill, pushing it upward through the roof of the cave. He drove it up as far as his arm and shoulder could reach, about 10 feet, and suddenly it broke through. Fresh air came down through the hole. That moment did not free him, but it told him the world still existed. The stale pocket breathed. James felt the shock break open. Then adrenaline took over. He attacked the roof with the shovel, trying to widen the opening straight up. But the effort dumped more snow over his gear and did not give him a climbable exit. He forced himself to slow down. He cut steps into the vertical shaft and worked carefully enough to keep the escape route from collapsing back into the space that had nearly killed him. At last he climbed out of the hole and into the night. He was covered in snow, half-dressed, his hair and beard packed with ice. Instead of collapsing there, he ran to the tent and unzipped it. Dylan remembered seeing James appear in the doorway, covered in white, asking for help getting his gear out of the cave. James had just spent hours digging for his life, but his mind had not fully caught up with what had happened. He still cared about equipment. He wanted his compass. He wanted his things. Dylan and the others understood faster than he did that the emergency was not over just because James had escaped. He was cold, shocked, and not thinking clearly. They got him into a sleeping bag, gave him a warm, sweet drink, and took turns managing him and recovering the gear. James had activated his personal locator beacon inside the cave at one point, then turned it off because the beeping became unbearable. Morning did not restore judgment all at once. James later remembered thinking about where they might ski that day, as if the night had been a strange interruption instead of a close call with suffocation. Dylan pushed to call off the trip and returned toward Charlotte Pass, where they could tell police they were alive and explain the beacon. James was annoyed, tired, angry, and still caught in the aftershock of the cave. They made their way out, but the survival did not end at the snow line. James later looked back at his behavior after the escape with regret, recognizing how shock had twisted his thinking and made him resist the people trying to protect him. Dylan carried his own anger and fear because he understood how close his friend had come to dying just yards away while everyone else slept through the wind. The danger had come from a chain of small decisions. They trusted a forecast that did not show what happened in that exact pocket of terrain. James chose a comfortable lee slope, without fully accounting for how much wind-blown snow could load over the entrance. He did not set an alarm to wake and clear the doorway. His friends were close enough to save him in theory, but too sheltered in a different way to know he was being buried. James survived because he woke up, because the shovel was within reach, because he kept digging after the first tunnel failed, and because he thought to use the ski pole upward when the old exit no longer made sense. He survived a soft white room that became a sealed container, where every breath and every shovel stroke worked against the same shrinking supply of air. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.